So, what is my bee venom therapy story? I did not come to bee venom therapy from a place of um, holistic enthusiasm. When I first got sick, it was a very slow process of understanding how bad my Lyme disease was. So, let me first walk you guys through just what was my health history prior to being completely disabled, and then I can walk you through basically all of the modalities that I used, and then exactly what didn't work, which was all of them, and then why I choose bee venom therapy and how it worked for me in both a short term way and then how it worked for me long term. As many of you guys have already been, how it's already been explained to you that, bee venom therapy is not something that is an overnight success. It takes time and takes diligence. It takes this kind of step-by-step approach and being very conscientious of never overdoing it so that you support the body. With that said, the whole point of BVT Bootcamp is to prep you guys for success so that you are in the best possible place to allow the healing to happen and that you don't have any risks associated with bee venom therapy. All of this was built because I went through many trial and errors with bee venom therapy. And you'll be shocked, many of you, to find that I actually did try it as one of my first modalities and basically went into anaphylactic shock and decided never to touch it again until I got so desperate that I ran out of all money and I was down to a few $1,000s, homeless, bankrupt, and basically with nowhere to turn. And so bee venom therapy for me was not an easy choice. It was a choice that was kind of forced on me because I had no other option. And I always say to this day that if I hadn't gone broke, I wouldn't be alive today. It was really the fact that I had no more resources to throw at untested modalities that were only hurting my body that I just basically said, it's either bee venom or death. And obviously I'm here today and it worked. Okay, so when I first got bit, I knew I got a tick bite about at least at this point, nearly 10 years ago. During that time, I was traveling back and forth for work between New York and London, and I was on a transatlantic flight nearly every week or every other week, at least 2 times a month, which was very, very hard on my system, even though I was much younger then. And I was just had a very, very busy lifestyle. I had built and founded my own organization called the Accompanied Literary Society. It was a nonprofit in New York that threw events and supported the publishing industry and authors and poets and media. And so I was very busy having a very full, exciting, very glamorous life, very different from what I have now. And I worked hard and I played hard. So I got a tick bite in the summer before I started having these symptoms. And I didn't really notice it. I didn't know much about Lyme disease. I pulled the tick out right away. And everyone I knew that was around me just said, don't worry about it. It's hardly been in for long. So I didn't, obviously. And many of you are going to be like, yep, that was me. Concurrently, what happened is that I started over the next 3 months starting to have some really weird symptoms. I started having night sweats where it got so bad that I would actually keep extra sheets and extra pajamas next to my bed as I would soak through it. I went to a few doctors about this and they just said, oh, you're stressed. Oh, it's just hormones. Don't worry about it. It will go away. And it did. Then I started getting really horrible neck pain where I couldn't move my neck. I was a chiropractor for the first time ever, every week getting cracked, and, that provided relief. And I was just told, oh, you knock something out during Pilates and, give it some time and it will heal. And it didn't really, but it was roller coastering through that joint pain and the neck pain, but it was severe. Then came the migraines. So I started getting migraines that would basically debilitate me and I go blind in one of my eyes. And literally just like my whole eye would go black and I would only be able to see out of my right eye. And I would be in bed for a day or two. But again, these are roller coastering. And then as I was spending more time in London, I started having these really weird symptoms of passing out uncontrollably. I'd be cooking eggs in the morning with my partner at the time, pass out. One time he left for work in the morning, came home for lunch. And when he left, I was taking a piss in the toilet. And he came back and he found me with my pajamas around my ankles, passed out. That probably, as he shut the door, I passed out, and I was passed out for 4 hours. Each time I went to the hospital, each time they said, "You're fine. It just must be all this transatlantic flying and all this traveling." And I just thought, oh my God, I need to stop flying so much. And I did. After that, I started going deeper into taking better care of myself. Less champagne, less Marlboro Lights. I was a big smoker then. More green juice. And over the next about 8 months, I really seemed to get a hold of my symptoms. I stopped passing out. I still had neck pain. I still had intermittent migraines. And once in a while, night sweats, but it just seemed to go away. Fast forward about 6 months in, after, I kind of felt like I was resolving it, and I had my first bout of melanoma cancer, of which they excised half of my calf because it was such a fast growing melanoma. It was going into a place where it was very, very dangerous. So they had to open my leg up, take out half of my calf muscle, and take out a deep amount of tissue. And that was incredibly upsetting, as you can imagine. And I realized at that moment that my health was not something I could take for granted anymore. However, I got busy. I, was given an opportunity to start an ebook publishing company and travel around the world. And clearly I'm a sucker for overextending myself. And so I did so. And I really didn't have outward symptoms. Besides, I started having increased anxiety, increased panic attacks, which I never had before. And these night sweats, migraines, just like they would come and go as I got stressed and I wasn't taking care of myself. And then I got another melanoma, and then another. And I knew something was wrong, but I went to many of some of the now top, well-known, very influential functional medicine doctors around the country. I went to Dr. Alejandro Junger. I went to Dr. Lipman. I saw some of the best, and no one bothered to test me for Lyme disease, even though they all speak about it now. No one bothered to test any of the tests that we're giving you. And I got a lot of acupuncture. I got a lot of supplements sold to me. But since I was, quote, functional, I just was, discounting that it could be any pathogenic infection. I get bit again. The second time I got bit was a moment that will forever be in my memory. At this point, I'm running a magazine in New York. I'm pretty functional. The morning that I got bit, I threw a huge meeting in my offices. I had about 60 people come in, and people fly in from all over the world. It was an international company. I then drove myself 4.5 hours at that day through traffic out to Long Island, where I had a house on Shelter Island. And I then played 2 doubles tennis games back to back. And then I threw a dinner party, and then ended up dancing on tables to 2 a.m., at a beach club. So I was very highly functional. It was a very long day. The morning after, I woke up and I had a tick bite, and it was already starting to become a bullseye. At that point, I knew people with chronic Lyme. I knew how dangerous it was. I called the doctor on the island. He prescribed antibiotics, and I went on antibiotics immediately. This happened on a Friday night. I woke up on that Saturday morning. I was expecting to go back to work because people have flown in from all over for a Monday meeting. I never made it. I never went back to work. I never went back to my office. I never even cleaned out my desk. From the minute I started the doxycycline, I had no idea why I felt so horrible. I went into shivers, almost shock. I was shaking. I felt nauseous. I was having, diarrhea. I had no idea that I was what was in a herx. It wasn't that I just got sick with Lyme disease at that moment of that tick bite. I had no idea for the past 2 years, I had always been sick with Lyme disease, and that all of my health issues were all Lyme related. But when I started the doxycycline, what happened is my body started killing off massive bacterial pathogenic infection, and potentially viral at the time. without me knowing that I was currently that sick. And so my body went into shock. I never went back to work. And from there, I rapidly descended. What I do know is that the tick was carrying babesiosis, which is a parasitical co-infection of Lyme and can be fatal in about 10 to 15% of the cases. And it nearly killed me. I was that sick with already chronic Lyme that by the time I got bit by that tick, my body and my immune system wasn't able to handle the onslaught of babesiosis. That tick also had Bartonella. So at this point, I'm rapidly losing weight. I can barely lift off my head. And I go to doctor after doctor in New York, and each doctor just tells me that it's in my head. I was told that I was depressed. I was told that I had an anxiety disorder. I was told that I needed to go get checked for mental health. And I kept saying to the doctors at the time, I was in a very, hot relationship with a, hotelier turned fighter pilot, F-16 fighter pilot. So you can imagine how happy I was. He was like dating Tom Cruise. I was running a magazine, and I had a big, beautiful social life with awesome friends that I still have today. So I kept saying to the doctors, how did I all of a sudden from like A to B immediately get so sick and so depressed that I'm basically unable to get out of my bed? So I only, illustrate this because so many of you, some of the first symptoms you've had is anxiety or depression or panic attacks, and they've happened for years. And I'm just here to say that I was one of those people that even when I could control it, no one even noticed it was wrong. It was just something I was dealing with going, I'm too stressed. But when it got to a place that I couldn't function, the first place the doctors went, even though I spent half of my time in the place. So Shelter Island, as a fun fact, is where the name Borrelia burgdorferi comes from. Lyme disease was not actually discovered in Lyme, Connecticut. It was discovered by a doctor, Dr. Bergdorf, in Shelter Island. So I was living in literally the ground zero of Lyme disease. I spent almost every weekend out in the woods being active, and doctors never bother to check me for Lyme disease. Never once. To me, that's still unconscionable. This was not that long ago, and Lyme was endemic at that moment, but that is my story, and I think it's a story that many people share. So basically, after that, I fell apart, and it took me 3 months to find a doctor willing to test me. I paid for IGeneX testing because my first Lyme test, which was ELISA and Western blot, came out negative. And when my IGeneX came back, I showed positive for both chronic and acute Lyme disease. I showed positive for Bartonella. I showed positive for reactivated Epstein-Barr virus and for babesiosis. My babesiosis didn't come back right away, though. There was the one that was basically outstanding for about 5 months, because this is the crazy part. In New York State, they wouldn't release my babesiosis results to the doctor because I was at a level of infection that basically New York State did not believe. So they had my doctor retest me another time. And then they retested the retest because they believed that at this level of infection for my body weight, I should already be dead. I was nearly that sick that I was nearly dying from this. When my doctor got the word from the New York State Health Authority that I was that sick with babesiosis, he had the nurse call my house, and they said that they were sending an ambulance to my house to pick me up. Meanwhile, at this point, I'd been suffering for 3 months, unable to walk, scooting along my floor because I was too weak to even stand, barely able to eat. Yes, I have friends who could help me, but if anyone has ever been this fatigued and this sick, sometimes even asking for help feels too hard. So I would just spend my days basically by myself, just lying in half consciousness, half stress and worry. But at the same time, I just thought, is it cancer? Is it something? But I was many times too weak to even reach out to the right doctor. So this is why I'm such a big advocate of advocating for yourself, because I didn't know how to. I went to all male doctors that basically told me it was in my head. And it was a really hard moment for me, not understanding whether I was going crazy, whether I had a fatal disease or what it was. It was that extreme. Each few weeks, I would say to office. I'm coming back. Don't worry, don't replace me. I was single. I don't come from a wealthy family. I had no safety net to catch me besides my life savings at the moment, which luckily I had. And I was terrified of not ever being able to go back to work. And I didn't for many years after that. So fast forward, I get the right diagnosis. I realize at this point that I had, certain antibodies through the IGeneX that showed that the Lyme disease was probably a very, very long-term infection of 2 or 3 years. And I was able to piece together my history. And then that was when I realized that all of the neck pain, the extreme anxiety attacks, the night sweats, the migraines, the passing out was POTS and was Lyme disease. And from there, I was put on a cocktail of antibiotics and antivirals and antiparasiticals. I never felt better. I only got sicker and sicker. My POTS came back and I started passing out uncontrollably. Over the next year, I was very desperate. I tried everything from ozone. I even invested in my own ozone machine so I could give myself my own ozone IVs. I did IV antibiotics. I had a cath put in. So if anyone is a fellow port sister or brother, I know what that's like. That's the scar that I have here that I'll always hold. And I went through it all. I tried every herbal remedy, Buhner protocol, Zhang protocol, every Lyme doctor I could find, special protocol. I went keto. I went fasting. I tried every antiparasitical, every antifungal. And what happened is that my body I started getting into a chronic condition of massive candida from the antibiotics. I got into chronic conditions of just herxing constantly. My inflammation was out of control. And none of these modalities I was trying were working. And I went really deep. I tried, IV turmeric to be anti-inflammatory. I, did really weird things like procaine injections for my migraines. Pretty much everything that is out there, from low dose immunotherapy to IVIG, I did and I tried. And nothing worked. I never found a way out of this. And in fact, I just got sicker and sicker and sicker and more dysfunctional. So when I started out, even though I was so sick, my thyroid was perfect. I didn't have any autoimmune diseases. And then as I was being treated, I just went into a place of just, this constant, slow, just like dissension into more sickness and more sickness. I did hyperbaric oxygen chambers too. When I say I did it all, I did it all. And then I found myself in a place where I was quickly losing money and I needed to figure out something else. I went to New Mexico. I went to a Lyme literate doctor there. And my first week there, after a week of IV, treatment, whether it was antibiotics or antiparasiticals or antivirals, I was then introduced to Venom. There's a woman, her name is Voice, and I think it's Voice Sterling Jones, and she runs what is called the Hoshindo Clinic in New Mexico. And she's a big proponent of small micro stings done on acupuncture points, and she teaches people to do this all around the world. I met her. She's very sweet and very nice. She gave me my stings that day. She did a testing on me, and I was never given any type of testing before. I was not given comprehensive testing from my own Lyme doctor there. I had gotten testing during that week, but it wasn't back yet. So there was no testing done on me. There was no intake of whether I was living in high mold, whether I was eating gluten-free, whether I was, stressed. And obviously I'm, in a foreign state for the first time. I'm working, like I had to arrive in a wheelchair. I was too weak to walk. I was, not able to take care of myself. And yet after a full day of antibiotic therapy, I was given a bee sting. I immediately went into anaphylactic shock. My throat closed up. I could barely breathe. I went into a panic, and I was given liquid Benadryl I was never given an EpiPen. I was never even told the safety mechanisms. And I basically ran out, as much as I could in a wheelchair, ran out of the clinic and vowed that this shit was crazy AF and that I would never sting myself with a bee again. And I was probably allergic because I had never gotten stung. And then I forgot about bee venom therapy. I really thought that it was bullshit. I thought it was dangerous, and it clearly put me into a state of danger, and I discounted it. Another year goes by. I basically run out of money, and I had heard of a few people really having great results with bee venom therapy, and I was still back at the clinic in New Mexico. I would go back and forth between New York and New Mexico. And at the clinic, they had a new nurse. Her name is Nurse Geahan, and I got to know each other over the course of a few months of me getting IV treatment there. And she had said to me that she used to have because I would be crying in the IV room and just like, I was basically running out of money, running out of options, not getting any better, and becoming really suicidal. And she said to me, don't let this get to you. I was just as sick as you, I promise. There's a way out, and like, you're going to get better. She never told me what that way out was. She just said, you're going to get better. If I was as sick as you are and I'm healthy now, so can you. And it wasn't until my parents came to town and my father and my mother were being hit up by me to start supporting my Lyme treatment. And my parents, as I said, I don't come from a wealthy background. They balked at it. They asked me how much it was costing me a month. And I said, well, it depends on the month, but 2,000 to 15,000. And they just said, no way, Jose. And right at that moment, Nurse Geahan walked into the restaurant we were sitting in. I said to my dad and my mom, guys, sometimes it's just a matter of time. And I just need you just to like get me through the next 6 months. I promise I'll pay you back when I get healthy again. And, look, the nurse that works at the clinic, she just walked in. She was as sick as I was. So if she was as sick as I was and she's good, it's just a matter of time. My dad, who's a cynic, was just like, I need to talk to her. So he came striding up to her, introduced himself. I completely subverted to like the, 10-year-old child being like, oh my God, Dad, you're being so embarrassing. Like, oh my God, please don't. And he basically asked her, how sick she had been with Lyme. And I told him that, she'd been very sick. And she said, yes, I was as sick as your daughter. And my dad said, well, how did you get better? Did you get better from this, all the stuff that my daughter's doing? And Nurse Geahan became really quiet. She said, I'm not really at liberty to talk about it. I'm not comfortable. And my father kept pushing, and she started going into how this is her full-time job, how she's a single mother, how the clinic pays for all their health insurance, and she's a single mother of 3 children. And my dad said, I need you to tell me right now how you got better. And she reluctantly told my father and me, bee venom therapy. She's like, I stung myself with live bees and it saved my life. My dad said, that's exactly what you're going to do, kid. So it was my father, his very cheap nature, and the fact that I had run out of all other options and money, that I ended up going back to bee venom therapy. This time, though, I was very conscientious of not being on all these IV antibiotics, but I was still very much married into this idea that the Lyme doctors had my best interest in mind. And this is a broad Lyme doctors, but this is for all functional medical doctors. Not everyone has the same understanding of Lyme. Not everyone has the same deep understanding of the complexities of the different layering of pathogens and how they affect the body and autoimmune issues. And, I was someone who was very swayed by, the sweet hand holding, the, emotional stroking of my state. I at no point had any doctor sit me down and say, this is a strategy, we're going to do it this way. If this doesn't work, we're going to do it this way. This is why it works. It was mostly, it felt like they were throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what stuck, and nothing was sticking. So I started bee venom therapy. This was believe 6 years ago today, seven years ago today, or not today, sorry, 7 years ago, like around this time. And basically I went into deeper understanding of bee venom, and but hadn't let go of my feelings about you know, how do I put this? I hadn't let go of a deep belief that the doctors were always right. Put it that way. Um, so I never questioned the doctors. I just kind of allowed them to throw spaghetti at the wall and went with it. I say all of this because of the fact that as I started doing bee venom therapy, I started to really improve. About 3 to 4 months in, I was feeling like myself. And I had decreased joint pain, I had decreased brain fog, I had increase of energy, and I saw that this was working. However, I, at this point, was really, really broke. I had moved in with one of my friends. She had a big walk-in closet. I was literally living in her walk-in closet. And I, walked dogs, took care of, like, babysat. It was a really, really hard life because I was used to working really hard. I put myself through school. I, graduated college at 19. I had worked so hard my entire life, and now all of a sudden I was a dog walker in New York City, living in my friend's closet. But that was my life, and I just had to just fight through it. So when my Lyme doctor got in touch with me a few months after I started bee venom therapy, he said, "You know what? I have this amazing new low dose immunotherapy I can put you on. Why don't I send it to you and see what happens?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm doing really good on bee venom. There's no reason to send it to me. And anyways, I'm like broke. I have no more money left." And he said, "Oh, it's only a few $1,000s, but think about it. If you're doing this well now, imagine if I give you LDI, and this is a new LDI, it's working so well, and you get even better faster." And I thought, oh my God, imagine if I could go back to work in like a month or two, like my life would be saved. And so I scrambled the rest of my money together and I sent it to him, and he shipped me my next prescription of LDI. I injected it. Going from feeling like I could go on walks again, I was completely out of a wheelchair, I hadn't passed out for a few months since I started bee venom. All of a sudden, I was in bed again. 4 days later, I was in the ICU, and for a week, I basically fought for my life. What had happened is that the LDI had basically broken down my immune system. It was a experimental LDI, as all low dose immunotherapy is. When it was given to me, I should have been given the right instruction to cook all my food properly, to not eat green juice, not drink green juices, but I was given no instruction, but besides to inject it. But what it basically did is, because I was already in a state of sickness, I had no idea at the time I was living in toxic mold. It put my body into a state of my immune system just crashing. And I became the first person in the United States, the 12th person in the world, and the only person not in a third world country, not concurrently going through chemotherapy, to come down with a rare bacterial infection called Radiobacter. Two microbiologists were brought in from Boston to actually be able to understand what it was. And the doctors had never seen it in the United States. So they had to culture it, and they had to treat it with antibiotics to see which antibiotics would treat it. They called my parents up and they said, her fever hasn't stopped spiking to 106. We're losing her. Her organs are shutting down. She's in septic shock. And we still have about 24 hours left to figure out which antibiotic works against this bacterial infection. So you should get in a plane now because it's time to say goodbye. I was getting healthy. I nearly lost my life to doctors throwing spaghetti at the wall, to doctors treating me as a guinea pig, to me paying to be a guinea pig. And I remember laying in that hospital bed and thinking, if I survive this, I am going to advocate against anyone being a guinea pig. and advocate and be the strongest advocate for people that are victims of Lyme disease, because I don't want anyone to ever suffer as I did. The silver lining is that my friend, now husband, ended up never leaving my side at the hospital bed. And I realized in one of my fevers that he was probably the love of my life and that I should probably marry this man that I'd already said, I think we should just be friends. To this day, we're now married. So, it was a transformative moment, and it was a moment that I would never go back and change, but I nearly died from it. For those 2 years prior that I was passing out, each time I passed out, I, was in an extremely, unsafe place. I should never have been left alone. My POTS was so extremely bad. And one of the times I passed out a few months prior to beginning Venom therapy, I actually passed out while I was by myself in a shower and was found 7 hours later, naked in my bed, face down, throw up everywhere in the house, having no memory of what happened. I was badly concussed. I basically passed out in the shower. If anyone has dealt with fatigue from showering when you have Lyme, you know what I mean of just feeling so weak in the shower. And I must have taken a shower one of those moments that I felt weak and I just passed out, hit my head terribly, was bleeding, and there was no one was around. So I was found by a neighbor who happened to realize that I wasn't answering my phone and something was wrong and walked in, and otherwise I might have died. So everything that I teach you, everything I come from is not just from having bad Lyme, it's from literally nearly dying from medical negligence and just the systemic negligence that is, part of chronic illness. At this point that I was fighting for my life, I had spent over $150,000 on supplements, on IV therapy, hyperbaric oxygen chambers. I had it all. I had muscle testing, pretty much everything but stem cells I did. So when I got out of the hospital, I ended up basically admitting to my now husband that I liked him. And we had a heart to heart about, my strategy moving forward with my health. And he said, I've known you not for a long time, but I knew you before you started bees, and I knew you when you were doing bees. And he's like, to tell you the truth, I just saw this rapid recovery. And he's like, maybe it's just sticking to bees. And like everything, he gives me really good advice. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to just stop all supplements. I'm going to stop, besides like essentials like vitamin C and vitamin D, I'm going to stop all of the stuff that I'm just like doing and layering on. And I'm just going to concentrate on the bees. And I did. And I started feeling the great effects of them, but I ran into roadblocks. It took me a good year to figure out through trial and error that there was massive autoimmune issues going on and massive gut dysfunction that none of the other doctors had found. And so again, I want to go kind of back to my story that my first Lyme test, the ELISA and the Western blot, showed negative for Lyme. My genetics came back that I was not only positive for Lyme disease, but I nearly died from babesiosis. Let's fast forward. I didn't realize I had celiac disease. Why? Because my celiac disease test that the doctors ran, the anti-gliadin antibodies, never came back positive. It wasn't until I got an endoscopy that they found that the gastroenterologist was able to figure out that I had massive celiac disease and my entire gut, all the villi were basically destroyed. And I say this because while we go into lab testing, I want everyone to understand that the labs that we do are as comprehensive as possible at this moment. We're also in lab testing going to walk you through secondary labs should certain labs look positive that we just don't give to everyone. So some of you might be shocked to find that there is maybe 15 to 20 more tests that you need to do. But even with that, many times I want everyone to remember that we're looking at antibodies. And as the body is extremely sick, it has less energy to make antibodies. So I say this is that what I love about bee venom therapy is the fact that it has a multi-spectrum approach. It is not only effective at getting after bacterial infections, viruses like HIV, it's been proven, potential cancer cell growths, But it's also a massive anti-inflammatory, and it's been seen and proven to be an immune system modulator. And why that is so important is that there might be things that even in our testing, we do not know is going on with you. There's over 80 autoimmune diseases. There's no insurance that's going to pay for us to test 80 autoimmune diseases on you. So I just want this to be known at this moment that this testing is going to show us a lot, but it's not everything. And why bee venom therapy is so freaking amazing is because it doesn't matter what we don't find, is that because it's so multi-spectrum, it's going to work. Does that make sense? So fast forward from my, story of beginning bee venom therapy again, I ran into some roadblocks. I ran into nutrition issues. I ran into inflammation issues. I ran into mold issues. So that house in Shelter Island that had been my haven, but that I'd also passed out in, that had also been a place where I did the LDN, ended up being a black toxic mold dump. It was so toxic, but by the time I figured it out, that the owners decided to basically raze the house and destroy the house. Sadly, because I had moved in New York City to one of my best friend's closets, I had stored almost every single thing I owned in that house. So guess what? I lost everything. I couldn't give it away because it was so toxic. So one night I made a bonfire and had some friends come and destroy nearly everything I owned. So I say this because I'm clearly so upset about it, that I don't regret it. Because when you're living in high mold, you're never going to get healthy. When you're still not eating correctly, you're never going to get healthy. That bee venom works. It is incredible. It is going to change your life. But there are so many other things that have to be addressed in the same way. You have to be just as diligent about how you eat, how you handle your stress, how you handle your trauma, how you get out of mold. Every single thing we teach you in part 2 is absolutely essential. There is nothing that should be considered more important to you than others, right? And what we've seen in past courses is that many people go, oh, well, mold's my problem, but I'm, stress isn't, so I'm not going to pay attention to the stress. So what I'm trying to impart to you all today is that my journey was not easy. And one of the biggest most important visuals I want everyone to leave with today is this visual I use all the time in the Heal Hive, is that you're going to be on that roller coaster, that kind of feeling better, feeling horrible, feeling better a little bit, feeling horrible. You're going to be on it even with bee venom therapy, even with the Heal Hive. The difference is prior to the Heal Hive, you were on this roller coaster and it was on like a salt flat. It was going nowhere. It was on just a never ending plane of you're never getting off this roller coaster. There isn't an exit. Through the Heal Hive, through bee venom therapy, what we want for you guys to start visualizing is that you are going to have these up and downs. There still isn't going to be a perfect road ahead. But through diligent, comprehensive testing, through addressing all the things we do in a slowly ramped up way that starts to make it easy for you to change your lifestyle, change habits, have better sleep hygiene, control your stress, have tips and tricks of just how to biohack, what you'll be able to do is put that roller coaster on a mountain, and then there's an apex. And that apex, there's an exit, and you're finally free. And so you're still going to be on a roller coaster. There's still going to be moments, as you've heard in my story, that are going to almost feel like they break you. The difference is you get off the roller coaster at the end of the ride. You don't stay on it. And I got off the roller coaster, and to this day, there is not a single moment that I don't think the bees. There's not a single moment that if I see a bee, that I just do not deeply realize how much they saved my life. And I absolutely have seen from my own eyes, through our own members, just how transformative our Heal Hive process is, as well as bee venom therapy. And everything that you learn, realize you learn it because I already lived it and I made all the mistakes. And I'm here to help guide you on how to do it right. So you save time, you save money, and you save yourself the trauma of just staying on that roller coaster going nowhere. There's many more details to my story. I'll share them all with you. I can't wait to share with you, former lab tests and things like that to give you an idea of just how sick I was. It's very helpful, I think, for you guys to see, because you start to see, like if she was this sick, then I can get better too. And that's really important to have that hope. But yeah, that's my story. I found love through it. I found redemption. I found a new career, and I found, so much wisdom. And I have no doubt that no matter how bleak, no matter how frustrating you all feel at this moment, that there is such a positive future ahead. You just have to just steel yourself, knowing that, it's never going to be easy to empower yourself to your own radical self-healing, but you can do it. And we're here as your guides to get you there. And if I can do it, so can you. So that is my story in a nutshell. And to this day, it's the bees, my husband, and my cheap father that I have to thank for pushing me towards, something that I just naturally thought, how could these humble little honeybees change my life so? And I'm just glad that the world, the universe, all coordinated to teach me, and so that I can teach you. So I really appreciate you all listening and hearing, and I hope that has been illustrative of my journey and gives you a really, really good understanding of why I'm so passionate about what I do and why I believe so strongly about everything and every part of the Heal Hive.